Okay, so it's 6:30. Call the meeting of the Charter Review Committee to order. Michael, could you take the attendance, please?
Sure. Robert Brennan.
Here.
Scott Copley.
Here.
Scott Guthrie.
Here.
Jim Humphrey.
Here.
Brad Meyer.
Here.
Ben Pera.
Here.
Sarah Repose.
Here.
Michael Stevens, I'm present, and Ted Tracy.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Can you review the emergency?
Emergency exit is right this way through that door, out this side.
Great. Has everyone received a copy of the March 9th and February 23rd minutes?
I'm gonna do introduction.
Oh, excuse me. I'm looking at this agenda and not that one.
Well, this doesn't have introductions on it either.
Oh,
but we
okay.
have a-
So in any event, I'd like to introduce our legal counsel for the commission, Ray Angel. Ray is a Coventry resident. We had two great interviews with two great candidates. I think the only problem was Karen's duties in Kingstown, is it? That may have kept her from being at every meeting. So I wanted someone that's going to be here for every single meeting. And like I said, both excellent candidates. Okay. Now 2 minutes. You're gonna get a copy of March 9th and February 23rd.
Did it come from Ben?
Yeah.
I
It was March 7th,
didn't get it.
I did not see the one from the 6th.
You got the 23rd?
I don't have that either.
Oh, wait, hold on. No, that was the week, March 7th was the week before.
Okay, then we'll postpone the ratification of those minutes because we're not sure then if everyone got full sets.
Yeah, we got an email.
Were there supposed to be two sets?
Well, at the last meeting,
Oh, that's-
the 23rd was going to be sent to.
I did send out both sets of minutes in the email.
Okay. So there's a question on whether everyone got them, so we'll just postpone that until next week and put it on next week's agenda, along with maybe the minutes from tonight.
It looks like March 2nd, March 9th, but the February 23rd.
February
That's the one
23rd
that's
was the
missing.
one that we were waiting.
That was delayed, yeah.
I didn't get that one posted on the agenda, so
Okay.
that's why that was late.
Yeah, we have accepted March 2nd. It's February 23rd. That's still in question, and then tonight's minutes, correct? I mean, last week's.
Right. Okay, so old business. Our recurring discussion on elections, terms, party affiliation, ballots, and so forth. And did everyone get Sarah's email that showed sample ballots? And it kind of makes it a lot easier for us because it looks like there is a past practice of putting a question on top and then language on the bottom and maybe a summary below that. Does anyone have any more input on that? Does everybody think it's a good idea for us to maybe put our pros and cons together on it, send it off to the council on that issue? Maybe next week, vote on it?
I like the idea that the top line should be like just the heart of what the question is. Then we can put the language and the rationale if we want to include that as well.
To engage, to engage the voter.
Correct.
Right.
But like keep the question that we're asking front and center without any, don't let it be lost in the question.
Great, great. Anyone else have any or input on it? I just think I just want to make sure that it's going to be legitimate. And that the council understands that, yes, you can do it this way, so they don't have to deliberate and be told otherwise.
Do we, on Westerly's ballot, I know they had a lot of questions. They seem like they're all like almost bulleted points and they didn't even have the legalese in them.
Right, they were just questions.
Yeah.
But there were 42 of them. You're right.
Right.
Yeah, that was.
Let's avoid
let's-
Yeah, there were a lot. But we had one question on ours that
Two
took up the whole
pages.
ballot. One page, took the whole page.
Right, and how many people do you think really read that?
How many people just turn it
Just-
back over and put it in
exactly.
a machine, so,
Right.
Yeah,
you know, unless they just believe in every charter change, and that's not likely to happen.
I like the way that Wesley had it as a question.
Yeah, like a simple
Yeah.
question.
Nice,
approved, denied.
clear question. You know, but I do, needs an explanation as to where it is in the charter, and then just a charter reference.
So maybe what we can do is, legal counsel can put a question together that asks the question and stays within the limits and gives as much information to the voter to engage them, and then the rest of the stuff can go underneath. And I'd still like to make sure that it doesn't have that we don't have to have the exact language of the change. I don't think that anything we do is going to be really long. Usually the long stuff is an amendment and not something that takes anything out. So we'll figure that out. And
So we put a reference into the charter section that's being affected. If anybody
Right,
really
right.
wants to, they'll have the ballot ahead of time, we'll be able to see the ballot ahead of time, be able to look up the exact wording.
Could we do something, I'll just give this one as an example, not that we've made any decisions on anything, but I know we've talked about length of term for town council, like a question that just simply said, shall section 3.01 be amended to state that the term of a town councilor will be 2 years, like something simple like that.
Okay.
And then instead of doing the whole strike through thing, like I think that would be, ask our legal counsel.
In my experience, strikeouts are very confusing to people. I would just take yours and say 3.01 is what you said it was.
Yes.
Shall be amended to such and such, just to
Okay.
make it so that there's no question.
Yep.
You know, that's just wordsmithing it. So
And not put in what it was, just what we're proposing.
I guess under that, if I'm hearing what you guys are saying, under that type of a statement, you could put currently the term limit is 4 years.
Sorry, I don't mean to go backwards, but on the question of moving an explanation about ballot questions around, I don't see that in the charter. Is that something you want to add to the charter for a change, or could that be done administratively by policy or by resolution? Because
the way that
I don't
read-
see a change in here to be made.
the way that I read the state law, it's that there are certain things that you have to present. You have to present a question, and you have to present language, not necessarily the legislative format. We can have Ray look into it. I'm not sure if we have to put it in the charter or not. We could,
That was one of the
under
things that-
the next thing on our agenda, which is 1520, which is amendment of the charter. So would it fall under that, or would it fall under?
So one of the things that came out in our conversations with the two attorneys was that any opportunity we have to make the charter a more general guiding simplified document,
Right.
the better. And so I would hesitate to add a requirement in there that's more detailed that could be handled another way. But I think as a result of this, some of your recommendations is you might have a list of things that you think that council ought to consider adopting as policy that you're not recommending to be put in the charter.
Okay. And that would be under 6.2, right? Amendment of the charter, so that language, that first paragraph on a charter amendments. Kind of short.
See, I thought we were in section Article 2
Yeah.
about elections.
Yeah,
So,
but you had
They're
brought up
related.
changing the way that, changing the charter to address it. I think it would have to be under the next.
charter's not in Article 6.
15.
15.
Shall not be necessary for the full text of the charter or amendment to the charter be printed on the ballot. Any digest or description thereof or any custom statement which substantially expresses the purpose or identifies subject matter to be voted upon shall be sufficient.
So we put a simple question
So it is.
and an
it is
explanation.
addressed in our charter.
It is.
Yeah.
Under
15.2.
1520, last paragraph.
Yeah.
As long as the town council approves the statement of the question, right, I think you guys get to where you are trying to get to. That's simple. version
That's
of
the
it.
hurdle. We're trying to say, please put it in this way, because it will engage the voters
Right.
and they'll read it. Instead of having legislative language first, which we tend to turn them away from. Voting on that, so amendment.
So if this language is adequate, we're not proposing any changes.
Correct.
Okay.
So 1520 is the language. And what I wrote down as a note is, will you guys provide pros and cons? A list for a possible vote next week. Providing they have 9 commissioners. In other words, are you ready to vote on something and send something to them and give them like an update on how we feel? I have a couple of different ones I'd like to do it on, but they have to be addressed in different sections of the agenda. So, right here.
So this would be going in as a request to the town council as opposed to an amendment.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, the way I read 1520 is it's pretty much aligned with what we were thinking anyway.
Yeah.
Especially the last paragraph. It's might be reinventing the wheel here.
Nothing I'm reading, that's just so what it says here is you can do what we're proposing. Not that they've done it, because
Right.
obviously the examples.
Not necessary, but just
And that's why probably we're looking at a lot of other towns, like I'm looking at Barrington, which is very succinct, but references to the sections and paragraphs. You get to the heart of the question, yes, approve, reject, understanding it would be fleshed out and written up in the appropriate section of the charter.
Yeah. And plus, it's probably gonna have another legal hurdle over there. So, however the solicitor feels about things, he may be either pro con on some of the stuff that we do, so.
Even though it may need not have changed the language of the charter, it sounds like we want to propose something to the council in terms of the format for these questions
Yes.
going forward. But subsequently, anybody can do what they want to do.
Mhm.
I mean, who ultimately writes this, each question for the ballot? It's a legal solicitor. Okay. We just want to.
Well, we can write it.
we
And
could write it, present it, they can approve it, they can amend and approve, or
I'm not so sure that they can do that. Because we're the commission, so.
but on the same token, they
It's a
can
yes,
propose
no,
their own, they can
It's
also.
like a yes, no for them. And I just want to make sure that when we send something over there, that they're receptive and that they think it's a good idea to send forward. And I think every question is a good idea to send to the voters, providing it's not something.
I agree with what you're saying. I like the idea that we should be presenting it as we think it should appear on the ballot.
Right.
Same token, if I'm correct, at least they attempted to last time, the town council can propose amendments on their own without us. So
Yes.
they just look at ours, they could literally reject ours, change one word and accept it, that's why I'm saying modify it, maybe a roundabout way of doing it, but.
Because, as I've been looking at these ballots, there's other local questions that aren't home rule charter
Yeah.
questions too.
So Western one was like from the charter commission or committee, I can't remember.
Right.
Which one they used, and then it was town council, so they also let you know who's it's coming from.
Yeah. Again, our work is just to propose and help and help.
Mhm.
Hopefully maybe write them up so that's like they can go look at it and go, great, thanks. Saves
We'll
them
hold
some
off
time.
on that until I get a little more research done. In front of my computer, looking up state law as it relates to this law, and it's mind boggling, some of the stuff. Let's go to old business and, excuse me, new business. And financial provisions. We had a pretty good discussion about that. And I think that the council wants action on it. Ben had made a suggestion, and I think Sarah, it was, you kind of like went along with it. So how would you feel about providing the pros and cons, moving purchases to an ordinance to mirror with state purchasing regulations? In other words, Ben said that state purchasing regulations are at a dollar amount significantly higher than what the town does. And will the voters be willing to trust the town council to spend their money accordingly? In other words, within the law.
So our proposal would be to strike the dollar amount that we have, and then would we actually put, the town council has to make an ordinance to what the dollar, or would it be
Or follow
just
state guidelines.
just
56
reference the state guidelines?
5610, I think, in the code of ordinances, which gives them spending power. Am I correct? So,
I think we'd be striking it pretty much from the
so we'd be
charter.
striking the limitations and allowing the council to,
Make an ordinance to put their own.
If you think on the federal level, the Constitution says nothing about any limits on Congress's spending power. It's they shall coin money and spend money and control that. And I think that's what you want in a charter, is just that broad authority to do what they need to do. And then everything else will follow into.
so carrying the
law.
dollar amount year after year after year after year is like
An extra hurdle.
yeah, it makes it more difficult to keep up with what needs to be done, inflation and everything else. So why don't we do that? Why don't we put our pros and cons on Bob's sheet? We'll meet next week. And we will, summarize them and send that off to the council. I think it'll make them happy. I know it's gonna make the manager happy. Yeah, that's probably, a good first step, because I know that budgeting and all that stuff is gonna be on the top of our agenda.
So just Sarah's gonna look into something with regards to this procurement process, but we want ultimately want to reference state law, and we'll just.
Well, Ben gave a dollar amount, but what it should be is it should be at least equal to what they're gonna do.
Yeah.
It's not like they can spend money to build a highway. Their small purchases and our small purchases are probably way off. So, it's all contracts. You're entering into contracts to buy things, so. Go ahead, you look like you're ready. to
No,
say
that
something.
makes sense. Like, what did you say the state amount was?
It's like
19.
19,000 some and change.
Yeah, all right.
So as long as it mirrors, what the state does and is palatable to the citizens and the voters. I don't think that they're gonna run their numbers real high because,
Right.
We're matching them, but
Something like just an amount. Yeah.
it did have language in there that spoke of the Boston Consumer Price Index.
They did have an index, yeah.
So,
If the state's coming up adjusting their number, I say let's just have it say set to the same
then
amount.
we'll find out what theirs is
Yeah.
and.
Because if theirs is going up with inflation and whatnot, then ours just goes up
And
with
again,
it.
that
So.
can be in an ordinance
That's
That too.
right.
Yeah,
So
rather than a charter.
So Ben, since you work with this every day, since these are your rules that you have to
Yes.
live by,
Yes.
would you propose striking section 10.23 in its entirety, the competitive bidding? From that,
I need to look at it again, but
I don't think it was interesting.
I don't wanna overstrike out anything, but yeah, I could see that entire section coming out. as a matter of-
1972, the dollar amount was $1,000, by the way.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's come up a little bit.
But you want to cut out the
So
competitive bidding
just,
altogether?
just so.
Yeah, because
you know, I'm
numbers
telling
take
you
off
the
for that
truth.
anyway.
So crazy.
It doesn't change anything.
Right, so
Okay, yeah.
you still have a competitive bidding,
It's
State
just,
law requires
ordinance.
it.
Yeah.
And
so
that's
it
under-
just wouldn't be a
It
dollar
just wouldn't
amount.
be in it wouldn't be in the charter that,
so that way the council can make changes to it via
Yeah.
ordinance amendment, and it wouldn't have to be a complete charter change.
And
Is there
you
anywhere
can
else
just go
that
and spend.
falls inside the charter that you've seen? I don't know if it falls.
Is there a limitation on emergency spending? We brought that up last week.
I don't think there is a limitation on it. Obviously, when you're in an emergency, you're gonna do what you have to do.
Yeah. And for forgiveness after.
And federal reimbursement.
Sure, I didn't miss any part of that. I showed you.
It did look through your historical shows. I saw where they changed it. We changed it to about 10,000 in the ballot question.
Yeah.
So we can't keep changing it all the
Yeah.
time. It's crazy.
Right,
Right, that's-
exactly. That's what we're trying to.
Look at the
Yeah.
process it is to change it. So.
Yeah.
It's kind of like gets
Yeah,
to a
there was
crisis.
small
and
language,
double
but
it.
I think to us, just strike it or reference.
But it still
The
says
state
it in the
formula.
next paragraph.
Strike it as-
Well, I mean,
I just raised one issue,
Yep.
and tell me to shut up when you guys don't
No,
want
no,
me to
no.
talk.
no.
I'm just thinking, if the idea is to have the voters embrace the things that you guys are doing, that last paragraph that gives businesses in the town of Coventry a preference, that may not go over too big. If you take that out.
Yep.
Oh, good point.
That's it.
Good point.
But that's 1972 language, but
But that could also be added to the ordinance, correct?
If they did that, yeah, I mean, rather than, and notwithstanding the fact you said that you're covered because of the state law as far as bidding, if it was just changed to work performed in conformance with the ordinance passed by the town related to amounts, I'm not being very artful with it, but you could take out the amount and just put in that it's controlled by ordinance, town ordinance, whatever the amount is.
so.
I think really what we're talking about is a philosophical value that the charters can state that, you know, goods and services above a certain threshold should be bid out for competitive bid to get the best value for the taxpayer. And there is a provision for giving some consideration to local businesses if everything is equal. So I think from a philosophical standpoint, that's really what the voters or the citizens have a stake in for their charter, that their charter says this is what we want to have happen. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just getting it so specific as it binds the town's hands in the future because things change.
So then maybe it's a change, not a strikeout of that particular section and just changing the first two paragraphs and leaving the third.
You gotta watch out for me. I'm an extremist. I'll just strike it. I don't need
I'm-
it. We're good to
I'm about
go.
striking half of this and moving it to ordinance, because it really is, there's way too much in this whole document.
There's a lot to it that is overburdened. It's,
Well, what did this town come out with their code of ordinances? That might be the $1 million question, because if the charter used to take the place of both.
Long before the trial.
Really? So usually it's the opposite.
yeah, I mean, if the charter's new since 72 and the town was incorporated in 18.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you had a code of,
1741.
doesn't mean you had a code of ordinances, though. Some towns just got a code of ordinances within the last 25 years in Rhode Island, so. A lot of towns operated, this was their code of
Well,
ordinances.
the date at the bottom of the code of ordinances is July 1, 2009, but I don't know. Oh, it references 1991.
Those are probably changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah, they definitely are. That's true.
So
So it
pre-91.
is possible. That's what I mean. That might be why this charter is so meaty, because it might have
If it didn't
predated.
have a code of ordinances at the time, they might have wanted that.
Right, correct.
We do have set of, where's the ordinances available online or?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Under information code ordinances
Yeah,
and charter.
yeah, so I charted there today. Yes.
Yeah. But as you can see, I mean, the code of ordinances is quite documented. but that's where it's kind of the nitty gritty of
Okay.
everything.
All right. So we'll send, some kind of a, let's get up, pros and cons together on that, maybe do our homework. Come back next week, and if we can agree to send that over there with pros and cons and let them, ponder it, because they may want to consult with their solicitor too.
And give us good feedback on whether or not they like that approach.
Right.
Right.
As well, on something that we can always change course if we have to.
At the end and then find out.
And then
the
find
things
out
that
they don't like that
like it.
particular format, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's,
Okay, good. That's two good things to handle.
So, any further input on the sections 801, 18, 19, and 30? We'll just, we'll write off stuff on Bob's metric there, and next week, and if we can decide to send that off to the council with as many pros and cons as we can, hopefully more pros than cons. All right, so,
So, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong too. I mean, there's obviously a lot of other things within section 8. And I know we talked a lot about the budget process. And that's maybe just another topic. I'm gonna let you roll, but I know all we talked about was 10.23. We talked about a reformat on the ballot. It's gonna be just a recommendation. And we'll write it, and hopefully they will embrace a synthesized version of those questions as we go through these. Maybe I'm getting ahead of you on the agenda.
no, it's okay.
Okay. I know I was pouring through that. It took some time to just kind of pour through. We spent a lot of time talking about it last week. It's a big ticket item. It's complex on within the financial provisions on possibly embracing this North Kingstown, Westerly, South Kingstown process that we haven't talked about. I don't know if you want to get into that right now or not.
Can I do that?
It's probably lower hanging fruit because that's a big one. Yeah.
No, we can do it. Go ahead.
Okay. Again, when you think about it too, to try to synthesize something like that, it's hard to synthesize, but when you think about it, it's really moving away from a giant financial town meeting, whether it used to be where you voted. Now it's where you just get information about the budget. But now the way the other towns embrace is they have public hearings, which we still have, one or more.
And we have a process.
One or more. But then all of a sudden, what we've been talking about changes significantly. It allows, after those public hearings, people to do line item level suggested items with a small
Voter
number,
participation.
of signatures, line item X, or a new thing, we think you need to do Y. Like when I spoke with one of the town clerks, they said, somebody suggested a JS survey on a lake or something like that, and they embraced it. It was just a good idea. The town council can take or leave those after the public hearings, after like preliminary budgets are publicly accessible, the line item level detail. They can write that up, and the town council would review those, say there's 1, 2, 3, 20, to maybe adjust. What they would then come up with would be a final town council approved budget. Then the next thing would be another petition opportunity with a like threshold of $250,000 to make a substantive change to the budget. If verified with appropriate number of signatures, which we discussed a little bit, up or down. You keep the budget as approved by the town council, you change it by $352,000, whatever, with reasoning and why you're doing it. People go in there, may say there's 3 of them. Keep it as the town council approved it. Make that change, you can only vote for 1. So that's a big difference. I mean, that's kind of a quick summary of it. That's a big difference, but I think it does allow a lot of people to only stand up in front of a microphone for hours and hours, where there's really a small number of people to impact the budget. And then it gets us to a vote that it's not just yes or no. And if it's no, you do another one. If it's no, you do another one. If it's no, you do another one.
That's what we're trying to get away from.
And that synthesizes it. So I think that's a really good thing. I'm just was thinking, I know a few of us on the table like the idea of that. I
Yes.
think a couple of us need to flesh that out and bring something to the table. It's a lot, it's gonna be
Long.
long. I'm trying to, how do you synthesize that? Because essentially, the big thing is,
How do you present
there's
it?
not a financial town meeting.
Mhm.
There's plenty of opportunity for the public to participate though. And it kind of brings the budget to conclusion, and it avoids the bottleneck of getting our budget process done. I think that's what we were talking about. And maybe we need a pros and cons on that, if everybody understands it.
Man, we can do
I
that.
think we talked about it enough to understand it, just from a pros and cons perspective.
So.
If we like it, then it needs to be fleshed out.
So maybe get it down on paper, see what it would look like, adjust the wording as we need to, and get a working document going.
Right.
That we can build off of.
Right, exactly. And I was looking at that really nice spreadsheet that we had, your spreadsheet, I think, right? So I just took the first one and I kind of started putting those in there with reasons why. But I think still stay, let me go back a step, do the pros and cons first. I would really like that. Because if we all agree, because then we take a super set of pros and cons and we look around, we kind of go together, right? And go, we want to do this.
Mhm.
Then it needs to be fleshed out, I would think, particularly this guy, bring it back to the table in writing and we go, yeah, this is good enough to forward to the town council. That's me.
You're modifying a lot of the chart.
Yeah,
That section of the
Yes.
charter in there.
yes.
Remember something, that
And we gotta make sure it's implementable. That's not even a word, but
Sure it is.
It is. You just
It's
said it.
gonna
We
be.
all knew what you meant, so.
Yeah, but I remember the town clerk warning me, he's like, you've got to verify signatures, and you got to verify signatures
Sure, the
again,
feasibility of.
and there's a timeline to get all that done. It's work on your part.
But there is no urgency to get anything done on this commission by this March 23rd date. Because anything that
No.
we do is not going to be acted on
Of course,
until after it's,
understood, yeah.
approved or not approved by the vote.
It's a next year thing,
So,
at best.
I still kind of look at different cities and towns that do it differently all across the country,
Yeah.
and it's interesting.
It really is.
But my big thing is we need to get the confidence back of the residents of Coventry. And a good way of doing it is by looking at every option. So,
Absolutely. I think there could be another idea out there too.
Oh, sure.
For sure. Again, bottom line is the public feels included, they can influence, they'll be heard. Because if that doesn't resonate, then we're not doing the right thing.
They
Yeah.
basically would have, it using the model you said, they have an opportunity to participate before anything is really decided
Right.
on. Then they have opportunity to input for the final decision, and then they still have an opportunity to say, we still think something else should be done about it. So it's like you have it before, middle, and after.
Right.
Public always has that opportunity. That's, I think, the fear of the public is that it's like, well, if we were to just scrap this, that the town can just do what they want, and whatever side you're on, somebody's like, they will just raise taxes like crazy. They will not raise taxes. Like, they will give no money to, it's like, the public wants to be able to say, we have an opportunity to participate and influence change. Like, it's both. It's not just one thing. It's one thing to go to the microphone and say what you think. It's another thing to,
Right.
file petitions, get the ballots out,
Because you end up with what I've seen, we talked to clerks, some well thought out ideas, particularly in the line item one. I was surprised. I thought, oh, you got a million, because I remember a piece of toilet paper, napkins, and town meeting I went to. The first one, actually, she says proven to be very helpful. Her actually concern was on the other one because of the number of verifications of signatures, and I think it was more town clerk work that they had to
it's
do.
actually more to canvass's work.
Yeah.
And and with Ted's language, with the 200 or we'll say 250 people, that's not a big issue. Because when election time comes around, they're verifying thousands of signatures.
Okay, that's good to hear.
It's all they're doing is they're comparing it to a signature that's on file, in their card index.
Mhm.
So that is the last resort for anything, I believe, when it comes to elections, that the verification of the signature is the verification of the signature. I am who I am, or this is who I am, and I swear that I am that person. So,
Yeah, when I was writing this up, I was thinking of using percentages, remember? So I used like 1%, and then I just looked at the $250,000, and I didn't want that to be a number either, so I just made that 0.2% of the
the
budget.
overall budget.
Yeah, which was to about $250,000. So We could just do that metric,
That's it.
something like
So
that.
that way it's
Yeah.
adjusted with time.
Yeah, exactly.
So far, Ted's proposal wins, but it shouldn't stop us from looking elsewhere to see, you know, in different
Yeah.
states what they do.
Yeah.
I have a suggestion for when you approach your changes. I think you have some options where you could either propose a revision to the existing language in the ordinance. You could strike out and replace, or strike out and not replace, like we talked about the other one. And just maybe kind of having that as your guide as you approach each of these different issues. Do you want to work with the existing language or not? Are you going to strike the existing language and replace it with whole new, like, this whole section 8 on voting for the budget? You might be eliminating 8.18 and 8.19 entirely and just having one new section for
Yeah,
both.
I think that in this case, it may be true.
So just,
This is my thinking.
but I think if that's what you're suggesting to the council, it would be good to highlight that so that they don't, just so you don't confuse people. Is this a revision? Which section is this supposed to be? Versus,
We're striking
No,
it
this
out
is
and
all
we're
new.
putting a new.
yeah.
We're rewriting it, yeah.
As part of our pros and cons.
More as a categorization of your options, and then you're gonna write pros and cons for the recommendation.
And what are you doing?
What are you
for the
doing?
previous, so that
And
you're
then
clear?
why are you doing it?
Exactly. And obviously, why, that's our pros and cons, the reason why. How is this better? How is this gonna help?
So we'll put our pros and cons together about moving state purchasing. Moving purchasing to be aligned with state purchasing regulations and. Section 9, Office of Personnel and Records, we talked last week and was the manager wanted to know who the director was, and the charge said, of course, that he's the director. So he also brought up something about the board canvases and whether it should be removed from that section, which was section 9.
902.
902. So that's something that I think probably is more guided by state law than what's down here.
Yeah, 9.02, I have notes on last week.
So personnel board was in there. We don't have it anymore. I don't know if it was ever it was part of an ordinance, I would imagine, or they just did away with it at some point. But it was never taken out of the charter. I know some people are pro and con about taking things out of charters when, when a new administration comes in, they like to kind of like revert back to the old way sometimes. One of his other questions was the board of canvases, and you mentioned a bad employee that wrecks things or is a rogue employee. And that kind of bothered me. It almost made me think that using this commission to discipline an employee isn't a smart move, and it's not going to happen with this commission. The other thing that I noticed under that board of canvases is I went to the state law, and 1782 says that each member of a canvassing authority shall be appointed to serve for a term of 6 years. That I'll probably have to bring up differently because the board of canvases is not under the board of canvases office is not under personnel and records. So I think we go back and find out where it is, but
It's,
it's something that we're gonna have to look at.
it's in the
Yeah, the
beginning.
charter, it does have. it on the-
So it doesn't state that it's a 6-year term.
as provided by the laws of the state.
Okay, never mind, I was.
Which one do you got?
Well, I'm in section 2.05, Board of Canvassers and Registration.
It well requires it to be 6 years, and effectively,
Yeah.
we're doing that.
Well, I'm not
We
sure
hope
we
so.
are.
Well, hopefully we are, yeah, we should be.
I'm not sure we are. So,
I'm sure we can call board. find
yeah,
out
we'll find
What the
out
terms are, but yeah, they are 6 years.
and see if they are actually adhering to that. It's just something that cropped up when I was looking at local canvassing authorities, so.
So who appoints the board of canvassers? That's the
Town council.
Town council,
And there has to be,
but they follow the state law. That's how
right,
that goes.
and the state law said that, you have to appoint no more than 2 from a single political party.
Right, so there's 5 members of the Board of Canvassers, 3 acting members and
2 alternates.
2 alternates, but the 3 acting members they all have to be affiliated. And it either has to be 2 Republicans and a Democrat, or 2 Democrats and a Republican on the actual board. Then there's 2 alternate members, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. So if a Republican member or a Democrat member is not available, full-time member, then the alternate would step in of the same party.
And we have no cause at all.
Correct, but the Board of Canvassers has to be partisan. It
Pardon?
has to be.
Yeah,
That's state law.
yeah, I get that.
So the law says that they have to have a Republican, they have to be affiliated. You can't be an independent to be on a board of canvassers, correct?
Correct.
Wow, okay.
I saw that as a charter question in one of the towns. They wanted to include an independent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know
or allow
what, we
it.
might see that
So,
changing.
but that would be a violation of state law.
That, yeah, they
As
have
it
to
is
change
right
it
now.
on
Is
the
that right?
state level, they can't.
So
do
it's,
Wow.
Okay,
Okay.
So it's also ironic how we have nonpartisan elections right now, and then a nonpartisan town council
one time,
has
that-
to.
hang on, like, good.
yeah, that one time that he did win enough votes to become a legitimate party in the state of Rhode Island. And they would be excluded from this according to how it's written.
Well, same person was on the moderate party. And they've had some good runs. I'm just
I
saying,
don't
that, you know,
know if they ever got enough of a percentage of the vote.
I
to
think
do
they're
it,
both
but
going now, both.
Well, now-
He did nothing after getting.
Oh, the moderate party that Ken Block you're talking about?
no, first we were talking about the Cool Moose, and then when Healy ran for the moderate party in that, remember that?
Right. but when he-
Yeah, and you got a lot of the vote just by just putting the name in the hat, yeah.
You know, and this doesn't cover that, but it's a state law, so.
It's not really.
I wouldn't be surprised if you see that change in the upcoming years, but that's the way it's always been.
The board, it's 5 independents. What do you-
Well,
No, I know
especially
that.
nowadays where, I mean, I want to say it's near 60% of the state is unaffiliated, so, I mean, that excludes a lot of people from being part of your board of canvassers.
Right,
It's true in a lot of states. Yes, massive.
Yeah, that's a great point, you know?
people join a party for 1 day.
Right, exactly. Well, as long as they're a sitting member, they have to be.
Well,
affiliated. But
Moving along,
Okay.
because I know there's gonna be some people that want to watch some basketball tonight, Frank College.
Well, you know,
no, that brawl.
Yeah.
last
Was
week.
he
No
really?
way.
Yeah, he's public safety up there.
Really?
Mhm.
Oh, boy.
Terrible.
They might have been instigating.
No, actually, we're recorded and I don't want to say it, but as usual, things as they're reported aren't exactly the way that they seem, to say that.
No.
Oh,
And actually, I had already addressed 1023 earlier, and so we can put our pros and cons on the contracts and bidding and so forth to see if it's better suited to be in town ordinance instead of in the charter. I don't know if we would have to remove anything from the charter for that, but we'll have our legal counsel take a look at that. And don't see a whole lot of public out there, but we all are public, and I've always allowed each of us to speak as the general public. Does anyone
I would
have?
just add on the 1023 that if we're just striking what we have and saying we're gonna rely on an ordinance, I would suggest that in our proposal on what goes on the ballot, we do include that the state does require competitive bidding over a certain amount. So people don't get the idea that we're eliminating competitive bidding.
Right.
Because that, some people might see that we're getting rid of it, not knowing that there is still a safety net.
Well, then I'll do my research, and I hope Ben will also, and find out that exact dollar amount.
Right,
And, you know, maybe that there would have to be a paper trail of the increase in funding as it relates to the, I assume, Boston Consumer Price Index, which is written into the law.
Like
And I
this-
tried following that, and
as-
I can get any headway.
This is beyond us, but like if we suggest striking it and leaving it to the town council, pass an ordinance that can't. You know, if they, let's say it's 20,000, I'll just round up and say, let's say the state competitive bidding is 20,000. You know, if the town council wanted to pass an ordinance that just said, we're agreeing to this, fine. If they want to maybe say somewhere in the middle, say, why do they want to pick up an amount, let's say 15,000, that's fine. But like whatever it is, it's like on paper, we're taking out, it's the town council can set the bar.
Right.
But the state has a bar of itself that we can't contradict. So that way people know that it's like, we're just trying to make it easier to function. We're not taking away.
Explanatory.
So maybe that's something we should do this week, is look at other towns and their purchasing, if it's referenced in their charter or not. But I do think that, I think as a whole, this document, and I would love your expertise in looking through it. I think there are, and I don't know how this works, if we can group some of these things together, just saying, you know, we're trying to make the charter more in line with state law, so we want to get rid of, you know, the 10,000 in the bidding, we want to get rid of, I don't know, X, Y, and Z. Is it possible to group those things together and just say, you know, a blanket statement almost of making the charter in accordance with state law, in line with state
Like a
law?
cleanup bundle.
Like a cleanup,
Yeah.
exactly,
A,
exactly.
B, C, D, and E
Yeah.
with whatever reference.
And I watched the meetings or at least I went back and watched the meetings in anticipation of this, so I know you guys talked about that before. I think that there is a way. I think the question in my mind becomes, does it get confusing to the voters
Right.
that they didn't really realize they were voting on? And does one thing torpedo all the other things that you're trying to do? So
Right.
I'm still kind of thinking on that, but I read this only a couple of times, not nearly as much as you people have, certainly. But I agree that there are things in here that just don't exist anymore.
Right, right.
And
Exactly.
getting, if I may, this competitive bidding thing. I'll just play devil's advocate. That's assuming that the council does in fact pass an ordinance. So
We already have one.
there is one?
There is one existing on the books currently.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Yeah. But my idea in that was the fact that a new council or new council members, I should say, could come in November and they could decide, I don't know what the threshold is in the
Yeah.
ordinance now. 10,000 is enough, I want to up it to 15,000.
Mhm.
And then in 4 years, another council could come in and say, I want to bring it back to 10,000, but at least it gives them that flexibility without having to, you know, reconvene a charter review. commission.
Yeah, good point. Great point.
Another thing, I meant to tell you this earlier. So I went on North Kingstown's, through North Kingstown's charter on a couple of things. And then we talked about the canvases, and it said each member of the local canvassing authority shall be appointed to serve for a term of 6 years, beginning on the first Monday of March, succeeding the date of his or her appointment. And it goes on. So they have the 6-year
In their
in
charter.
their charter, which is state law. But when I went to amending the charter, it says each newly elected council following its induction into office shall appoint a charter review commission of 7 members to serve at the pleasure of the council, which is against the state law, because you're supposed to have 9. So, you know, it's just funny looking at all of the stuff, you know, original charters, maybe the original charter said
Right.
9 because it was state law, and then they decided to pare it down.
Maybe the state law changed.
Maybe the state law changed because I don't know of any
No.
charter besides this one. I mean, the one that I participated with on a couple occasions in Richmond did not have 7. And then the one in West Warwick last year before I started there did not have 9.
Really?
So,
Just wonder if it
yeah,
was-
so
if
I
it would
don't know.
test,
I would have to
if
look
it
it
would
up. I
pass
don't
the,
know.
the legal test, like, if somebody turned around and said, well, you didn't have 9, so whatever you did, there's no void. That's my concern.
Yeah,
So
that's a good question. I don't know what the state law is. I haven't looked at it.
it's actually not so much the state law as it is in the Constitution, under home rule. So under home rule, under the Constitution, when they first were putting home rule together, it said 9.
Interesting.
So
What do they do in West Warwick for this competitive bidding?
I
Do
would
they
have to
have-
look at my purchasing plan for that, but it's under ordinance. It's not part of
It's
the
not in the
charter, I
charter.
don't believe. I can look it up.
So
It's-
before this becomes more of a conversation,
Mhm.
we're recorded, and I'd like to make sure that we do things by the book. So is there a motion to adjourn?
I have one more thing I'd like to
Go ahead,
just
Bob.
bring up for something for discussion concerning actually Wesley's question 42.
And a lot.
I read them all.
Go back to those coworkers.
Shall the charter be amended to update text changes to be consistent with the existing Rhode Island state law and statutes?
Very simple, isn't it?
Very, very simple. And I'm just wondering if we could adapt that so that we did not have to go through this anytime a state law changed. Perhaps giving the town council the ability to do it by ordinance, requiring a review, requiring a legal review or something to make sure that it's all kosher and everybody's in agreement that this is against state law. And I just think that would solve a lot of those little problems that we're having in there and which are
Right.
falling out of compliance. And the charter is only required every 5 years. You could have a state law change that affects the charter within that period of time, and now you're out of compliance. Whereas the town council could then act and put us back into compliance.
Gotcha.
That's
Okay,
actually a really good question.
By ordinance,
I
you mean,
missed
right?
that, yeah.
And it's simple.
you know, you could have it require review at any particular point in time, whatever safeguards, you don't want it like the town council can change the charter anytime they feel like it.
But they can adapt.
They can adapt in compliance to be in compliance with the state law.
I say borrow the language. That sounded great to me.
Right,
I don't
exactly.
know, reinvent the wheel in that sense.
So if everybody's in agreement that that might be something worth pursuing, I'll start up one of those pro con documents on that.
Then
That we can start to take a look.
as long as we can do that legally, I'll check with Ben
But it's gotta, I'll draft. something.
without putting it on the agenda, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
I think that's kind of what we're trying to say though,
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
just a blanket question that covers us for all the little things that we find in here that don't necessarily.
inconsistent.
Right.
So. Any more public comment?
I have one quick one.
Okay,
In back to 15.2, I know we were all appointed to the board, this committee, and we're all spending our time doing this and, while not wanting to get to the level of Westerly with the 42 different questions, would it be worth looking at the last line of the first paragraph in 15.2 where we change the wording a little bit, where all of the recommendations from the council, from the charter review and the council go on the ballot.
Say that again.
So make it so all of our recommendations go onto the ballot.
So we skip the council.
1520, you mean, right?
And we do like Wesley has recommended by so-and-so.
So allow it, so we can propose changes, they go to the ballot. Town council can propose changes, they go to the ballot. The
Yeah.
ballot is what it is. And I think as it says in here, if we have two
Yeah, if
contradictory
they're
ones,
contradictory, whatever has a
gets
more
the most
vote.
will go on.
Vote supersede, yeah.
I actually gotta tell you, that idea has crossed my mind because sometimes just watching the last time around, it's like,
Yeah, they
they
pretty
met
much
for, as
denied
long as
almost
they basically
everything.
voted down everything, so.
Just to make sure.
I'm interested.
15.2.
Yeah, first paragraph, pretty much the last line. Like if it was something we wanted to discuss, each recommendation of the committee
Strike until
strike
it
out
says
and then just
shall,
put, and the town council shall be placed upon the ballot.
or end any recommendations approved by the town council. So we allow them to make it,
Yeah. Each
Yeah.
recommendation of the committee and the town council shall be passed based on the ballot.
I'm looking at 1972, so you'll have amended language there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Are you saying then 9 + 5? The majority?
Yeah. but they don't have to.
Yeah,
but
each
not-
respective party would vote on it. It would have to be approved.
Majority plus a majority.
Yeah,
Because right now, we put a recommendation to the town council, they can vote and say no, and that's the end of it.
Right.
The proposal you
It's like a
say
veto
is,
process.
yeah, it's like, we make proposals, they go to the ballot regardless, because we as a body decided it. And the town council can equally make recommendations, they go to the
Oh,
ballot,
this is interesting. Okay.
Or they could,
or put contradictory ones, say.
or they could just say, no, you
Like
can't do
Scott-
that.
It's like Scott said, at the last review, the town council looked at them and said, we don't like any of them, and whatever you did was, forgive it.
Yeah, they said no to everything, but then.
Then they change their mind, or they
Well,
said make changes.
They
and
reconvened and they passed, I think, 2 amendments. One of them being part of this. So,
This might be the.
We're in-
then
we're in
they don't
public
vote-
comment,
vote the
then.
majority on the,
yeah.
I have a feeling.
So we were starting to get to have a conversation here instead of the meeting, so I was going to adjourn, but there were a couple of comments made. I don't know if you have any, and I don't know how to shut that tape recorder off.
I
So,
will handle that part.
okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Um,
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, we are adjourned.